You know, as a father, there are moments when your child says something so innocent, so simple, but it sticks with you for years. Hey everyone, thanks for being here. If you enjoy real-life stories about parenting, family struggles, and the unexpected moments that challenge us, please consider subscribing to the channel. It means a lot, and it helps more people hear stories like this. So, let me take you back to a moment that seemed small at the time. My daughter, Jessica, was just 7 years old. She came over to my house one weekend and told me something that made me smile, but also made me think. She said there was a boy in her class who had a crush on her, a boy with special needs. I didn't laugh. I didn't dismiss it. I told her to be kind. I told her it was the right thing to do. But I also told her gently that he might have a tough life ahead of him, and that it's okay to tell him she just sees him as a friend. I never imagined how that moment would come back 2 years later in a way I could never have expected. It had been 2 years since that small conversation. Jessica was 9 now, smart, thoughtful, a little forgetful at times, but still my sweet little girl. One weekend, she came over to my place like usual. We were having lunch, just the two of us, when she said something that made my stomach drop. "Dad," she said, her voice quieter than usual, "do you remember the boy I told you about a long time ago? The one who liked me?" I nodded, setting my sandwich down. "Yeah, honey. What about him?" She looked down at her plate. "He's been touching me at school, in ways that don't feel right." I froze. I tried to stay calm, not to panic, but inside, I was screaming. I reached over, took her hand gently, and told her she did the right thing by telling me. I said, "That's not okay, sweetheart. I promise I'll do something about this." The next morning, I dropped her off at school like usual, but my mind was already racing. I pulled into a parking spot and immediately called the front office. I explained what Jessica had told me and said I wanted to speak with someone. They told me the principal would return my call soon. Then, I sent a quick message to my ex-wife, Kayla. I wanted her to know what happened. Now, Kayla and we don't talk much outside of what's absolutely necessary for Jessica. It's just how things are. So I figured a simple message would do. But her response, not what I expected. She blew up. "Why didn't you call me first?" she snapped. "I've been talking to the school about this for a month now." Wait, what? I stared at my phone in disbelief. I couldn't believe what I was reading. "A month?" I texted back. "Jessica never told me anything about it." I love my daughter, but she is forgetful sometimes. She forgets to bring her backpack, forgets her lunch, even forgets things I told her 5 minutes ago. But this felt like something she would have told me. Still, I tried not to blame her, but I couldn't stop thinking. Kayla knew for a whole month, and she didn't tell me. I was furious. I told her, "I let you know within hours of hearing about it. Why didn't you do the same?" Her reply, "You didn't ask." That was it. Just those 3 words. I stared at that message for a long time. You didn't ask. Who would ever think to ask something like that? What was I supposed to do? Call her up and casually say, "Hey, has our daughter been assaulted at school recently? Is that a normal thing now?" And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she added, "Besides, you're an asshole." Now, I've done everything I can to keep things civil with Kayla. I walk on eggshells around her. I avoid arguments. I stay respectful. We got divorced because of how toxic things had become. I didn't want to revisit that. But that comment? It pushed me over the edge. I snapped. "You know what, Kayla?" I texted. "We got divorced so we wouldn't have to talk to each other unless it was about our daughter. You're such a joy to deal with that I bought Jessica a phone for Christmas, just so I wouldn't have to go through you to talk to her. That's how easy you make communication." Now, I know I shouldn't have said that. I really do. But in that moment, I was boiling with frustration. This was about our child's safety, and instead of working together, She was using it to take shots at me. About an hour later, the principal finally called me back. He sounded nervous at first, like he expected me to yell, but I stayed calm. I just wanted answers. I wanted to know what was being done. To my surprise, he was incredibly apologetic. He explained all the steps the school was taking. The boy in question had been moved to a different lunch and recess period. The staff had been instructed to keep a closer watch. They were also speaking with the boy's parents and a counselor to ensure this wouldn't happen again. I thanked him for the transparency. Then I asked, "Can you keep me in the loop going forward? Because my ex-wife won't." There was a pause. Then he sighed and said, "Yeah, she's one of those." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. We exchanged emails and set up a direct line of communication. It was a small relief, knowing I'd be kept in the loop now. But the damage from the situation lingered. That night, as I tucked Jessica into bed, I held her a little tighter. I told her how brave she was, how proud I was of her for speaking up. I reminded her that no matter what, she could always come to me with anything, and I meant it. What started as an innocent crush had become something much darker. Something no child should ever have to go through. But more than anything, I was haunted by the fact that for a whole month, I didn't know. I couldn't help her. I couldn't protect her, because someone decided I didn't need to know. After that phone call with the principal, I felt a little calmer, but far from settled. The situation had shaken me, and despite the school's reassurances, I needed more than just a list of precautions. I needed to see for myself that Jessica was safe. So, the next morning, I requested an in-person meeting with the principal. To his credit, he agreed immediately. We scheduled it for that afternoon. When I walked into the school office, I was greeted with a polite but somber atmosphere. The receptionist recognized me right away and ushered me into the principal's office. The man behind the desk, Mr. Thompson, stood up and shook my hand firmly. He looked like a man who'd been through a long week, or maybe a long year. "Mr. Andrews," he said, "thank you for coming in. I understand how difficult this must be." I nodded, taking a seat across from him. "I appreciate you meeting with me. I need to understand everything that's going on. My daughter means the world to me, and I can't protect her from something I don't know about." He nodded slowly, his expression serious. "Absolutely, and you deserve full transparency. Let me start by saying, we failed Jessica in how we handled this, and we're trying to correct that now." I appreciated his honesty. It wasn't easy to admit fault, especially in a school setting, but I respected it. He continued, "When the initial complaint was raised by your ex-wife, we took it seriously. We began monitoring the students more closely, especially during unstructured time like recess and lunch. However, due to privacy concerns and the nature of the individuals involved, communication was limited." I raised an eyebrow. "Limited?" He sighed. "Look, I don't want to point fingers, but your ex-wife requested that only she be involved in updates related to Jessica's situation. We honored that, perhaps too strictly." I felt a fresh wave of frustration. "So you didn't contact me because she told you not to?" "She said she was handling communication with you," he replied, "and that you were aware. We now understand that was not the case." I shook my head. "That's unacceptable. I'm her father. I have joint custody. And if something like this is happening to my daughter, I have every right to know." "You're absolutely right," he said firmly. "And moving forward, I'll personally make sure you're kept in the loop. You'll be copied on all communications, and I'll send direct updates if needed." That was something, at least. But it didn't undo the past. I leaned in. "Tell me more about what happened, from your point of view." He hesitated a moment, then pulled up a folder. "The incident occurred during lunch. One of our aides noticed that Jessica seemed uncomfortable near a specific student. She reported it to the counselor, who then spoke with Jessica in private. That's when she described some unwanted touching. The student in question has special needs. He's on the autism spectrum. And while that doesn't excuse his behavior, it does mean he requires a different approach. I nodded. Of course, but Jessica shouldn't be a test case for someone's learning curve. Agreed, he said, which is why we adjusted his schedule. He now eats lunch in a separate room with a support aide, and his recess is supervised more closely. Jessica won't have unsupervised time around him again. Has he or his family been notified about what happened? Yes, the principal replied. His parents were shocked and upset. They're working with our special education team and a private counselor to address boundaries and appropriate behavior. They're taking it seriously. That brought me a small amount of relief. I looked around the office, then back at Mr. Thompson. Can I ask you something honest? Of course. Do you believe my daughter is safe here? He looked me in the eye. Yes, I do. But I also believe that we have to earn that trust back. It's not just about policies. It's about showing you, and Jessica, that we're serious. I appreciated that. I really did. Before I left, I asked to speak with Jessica's teacher as well. I wanted to hear from someone who sees her every day. Her teacher, a kind woman named Ms. Raymond, met with me briefly and said Jessica had been more withdrawn lately. Not unusual, she noted, after an incident like that. But she promised to keep a closer eye on her and to check in with her during the day. When I left the school, I sat in my car for a moment, letting it all sink in. I had taken steps. I had gotten answers, and I had a direct line of communication now. But something still bothered me. It wasn't just about the incident. It was about the gap, the silence, the fact that for a whole month, someone had decided I didn't need to know. And that silence nearly cost my daughter the support she needed from both her parents. That night, Jessica and I made cookies together, just like old times. We didn't talk about school or what happened. We just laughed and joked and made a mess in the kitchen. But after we finished, she looked up at me and asked, "You're not mad at me, are you?" My heart nearly broke. "No, sweetheart," I said, kneeling beside her. "I'm never mad at you. I'm just really, really proud of you." She smiled, and for the first time in days, I saw the light return to her face. We still had a long road ahead, but for now, she was safe. And she knew her dad was in her corner, no matter what. After my call with the principal, I tried to let things settle. I didn't want to fan the flames, especially for Jessica's sake. She's only 9, and already she's caught in the crossfire between two adults who should know better. I figured maybe Kayla just needed time. Maybe, just maybe, she'd cool off, and we could talk like grown-ups. That was my mistake. A few days later, I received an email from the school counselor. Apparently, they had scheduled a support session for Jessica to talk about boundaries, safety, and to help her process what happened. I was relieved. Someone was taking her mental well-being seriously. But nowhere in that email did it mention that Kayla had been included, or informed me. Again. I forwarded the email to Kayla with a simple message. Please keep me updated with anything related to Jessica. We're still co-parents, even if we're not partners anymore. I waited for her reply. An hour passed, then 2. When I finally got her response, it was short and sharp. You don't get to lecture me about parenting. You're only a part-time dad. That one hit a nerve. Deep. I stared at the screen for a while, fists clenched, jaw tight. I've tried for years to be the bigger person. Every insult, every dismissive tone, I swallowed them down. But now it wasn't just about me. It was about our daughter, about something serious, something that should have united us. I typed back. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm asking to be involved. Jessica deserves that. This isn't about us. It's about her. And then, she called. The second I picked up, she was already mid-rant. You think you're Father of the Year just because you called the school once? Where were you the past month when I was dealing with this alone? I didn't know, Kayla. I tried to stay calm. You didn't tell me anything until I found out myself. That's not how co-parenting works. Well, maybe if you were more involved, she spat. Jessica would have told you sooner. That one stung too. I see my daughter every week, call her on off days, take her to her favorite park, bake cookies with her. I may not have full custody, but I've never been absent. Not once. I told her as much. I reminded her that I've shown up to parent-teacher meetings when invited, that I paid for therapy when Jessica had anxiety last year, that I even got her that phone, not just for me, but for Jessica to feel connected and safe. Silence. Then she hung up. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to a dial tone that said more than any words she could have spoken. Later that night, Jessica called me. Her voice was softer than usual. Daddy, did I do something wrong? My heart sank. No, sweetie, not even a little bit. Why would you think that? Mommy was crying after she talked to you. She said you don't care about us. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to defend myself, to tell her everything. But she was 9, just a kid. My job was to protect her, not drag her into our war. I care about you more than anything in this world, I said, holding back tears. You didn't do anything wrong, okay? Grown-ups just sometimes don't agree, but none of it is your fault. She was quiet, then whispered, Okay. Then she asked if I could tell her a bedtime story. So I did. About a little fox who was brave and clever and always knew how to find his way home, no matter how dark the woods got. When I hung up, I realized something needed to change. I couldn't keep tiptoeing around Kayla's moods. Jessica deserved 2 parents who communicated like adults, even if it was hard. So I emailed the school again, asking to be looped in on everything moving forward. I explained the situation calmly, without blaming Kayla, but with clear boundaries. I needed to be informed. To my surprise, the counselor replied kindly and agreed. Then came the next blow. The following morning, I received a formal notice from Kayla's lawyer. She was filing a request to limit my parental involvement. She claimed I was emotionally unstable and a disruptive influence. Disruptive? All because I dared to speak up about something serious? Because I asked to be included? I stared at that paper in disbelief. Jessica was the only reason I hadn't walked away from every fight. And now, Kayla was using her as a weapon. Again. My blood boiled, not with anger, but with purpose. I knew this wasn't the end. The storm was just beginning. I never thought things would escalate this far. But after my heated argument with Kayla, I realized I needed legal clarity. Someone who could help me navigate not only the emotional storm, but the responsibility I had as a father. So, I contacted a family lawyer named Daniel Brooks. He came highly recommended and had decades of experience with complicated custody and co-parenting cases. When I explained everything, from Jessica's incident at school to Kayla's refusal to inform me, Daniel didn't seem surprised. You'd be amazed how often this happens, he said calmly. I met Daniel at his office the following day. He listened, took notes, and occasionally nodded, showing me he was processing every detail carefully. After I finished, he leaned forward and said, "This isn't just about communication breakdown. This could be considered parental alienation, especially if Kayla is deliberately withholding important information regarding Jessica's well-being." That phrase hit me like a truck. Parental alienation. Daniel explained that in court, one parent intentionally keeping the other in the dark, especially in situations involving a child's safety, can be viewed as harmful behavior, not only emotionally, but legally. It can affect future custody evaluations, school decision-making rights, even how communication is handled between parents. But, he warned gently, this doesn't mean we run to court tomorrow. First, we document everything. He advised me to continue using written communication, emails and text messages, so I would have a clear record. He also asked if I had documentation of my conversation with the school. I forwarded the email thread I'd started with the principal, and he nodded in approval. "That helps your case," he said. I told Daniel about Jessica's phone, and how I got it so I wouldn't have to rely on Kayla to talk to her. I expected some judgment, but he only said, "Honestly, that was a smart move." He then asked me the most important question. "What outcome are you hoping for?" I paused. I wasn't trying to take Jessica away from Kayla. I didn't want to start a legal war. I just wanted fairness. I wanted to be respected as her father. And I wanted to know, without a doubt, that my daughter was safe, and that I would never again be the last to know about something this serious. "I want a co-parenting agreement," I said. "Something formal. Something that makes it clear that I have an equal say." Daniel nodded. "That's reasonable. But be prepared. Kayla may not take kindly to being challenged." Later that week, I sent Kayla a calm, respectful email explaining that I had spoken to a lawyer. I emphasized that I wasn't trying to attack her or take anything away, but I needed us to work together for Jessica's sake. I asked if she would be willing to enter mediation, to develop a formal agreement about school communication and medical decisions. The reply came quickly. It was angry, defensive, full of accusations that I was trying to paint her as a bad mother, that I was being manipulative, that I always played the victim. The same old narrative, recycled and thrown back at me. But this time, I didn't engage. I forwarded the message to Daniel and let him respond. He helped me draft a reply that was professional, focused on Jessica, and free from emotion. It wasn't about winning. It was about doing the right thing. Meanwhile, Jessica seemed to sense something was off. She asked me one night, "Daddy, are you mad at Mommy?" I knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "Sweetheart, Mommy and I are just trying to figure out how to be the best team for you. Sometimes adults disagree, but we both love you. That's what matters most." She smiled and gave me a hug. That moment, simple as it was, reaffirmed everything I was fighting for. I don't know what will happen next. Mediation may work, or it may not. We may end up in court. But thanks to Daniel, I now feel prepared. Not just legally, but emotionally. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about control. It's about my daughter. And I won't stop fighting to make sure her voice and mine are both heard. I never expected things to shift so quickly. Just as I was preparing for a long legal battle, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, a few days after forwarding Kayla's angry email to Daniel, he called me. "There's been a development," he said, his voice calm but deliberate. "Kayla's attorney just reached out. It seems she may be open to mediation after all." I was stunned. After weeks of tension, cold replies, and outright hostility, this was the last thing I expected. Daniel speculated that perhaps Kayla's lawyer explained the legal consequences of withholding communication, or maybe she realized this wasn't going to go away quietly. Whatever the reason, I felt conflicted, relieved, but wary. The following week, we had our first mediation session. It wasn't easy. Kayla sat on one side of the table with her attorney, and I sat across from her with Daniel. There were moments when I could barely recognize the woman I once loved. She looked tired, bitter, defensive. But she was there. The mediator opened the session, stressing the importance of cooperation, especially with a child involved. Daniel calmly laid out our request. Formal shared decision-making authority, open communication with Jessica's school, and access to school officials directly. Nothing unreasonable. No personal attacks. Just fairness. Kayla rolled her eyes at first, but she didn't argue as aggressively as I thought she would. When it was her turn, she said something that surprised me. "I just want to protect Jessica, and sometimes I don't trust how he handles things." There it was, the real issue, not hatred, not malice, just fear. I didn't interrupt her. I let her speak. When she was done, I responded as sincerely as I could.
I get that. I really do. But I'm her father. I deserve to know when something serious happens in her life. Not as a courtesy, but because she needs both of us to be involved. There was silence after that, and then Kayla nodded, slowly. That moment cracked something open. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Over the next few sessions, we hammered out a formal parenting agreement. We agreed to notify each other within 24 hours of any incident involving school, medical issues, or behavioral concerns. We arranged for shared access to her school portal and teachers. I'd keep the phone line with Jessica, but we'd set boundaries on communication so it didn't feel like I was bypassing Kayla entirely. It was all written down, signed, and filed. After mediation, as I was walking to my car, Kayla stopped me in the parking lot. "You were right," she said quietly. "I should have told you sooner." I turned and looked at her. "Thank you," I said, not out of victory, but because I needed to hear it. That night, Jessica called me from her room. She told me about her day at school, how the boy who had touched her had been moved to a different class, and how her teacher had a new seating chart that made her feel safer. I asked her how she was feeling. She paused, then said, "I feel like you and Mommy are starting to be on the same team again." I had to turn away from the phone for a second. I didn't want her to hear the crack in my voice. "Yeah," I whispered. "We are." Life as a co-parent isn't always easy. There are emotions, misunderstandings, and yes, even moments where you wonder if you're doing any of it right. But at the heart of it all is a child who depends on you both, no matter how broken the past might be. If you found something meaningful in this story, or if you've been through something similar, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like this. Because sometimes, the truth is more powerful than fiction. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.